Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about Karolina Dean, one of the most colorful and powerful Cosmic champion released this year. But is she truly at the top of the Cosmic class? In this video, I'll break down everything you need to know before you use her. Let's dive right in. So let's start with the immunities. Karolina is 100% resistant to any incinerate effects. Now, this is different from being completely immune. This means that she can get inflicted with incinerate debuff, but takes 100% reduced damage. And as a bonus, if you've got willpower mastery, those incinerates actually help you to heal. On top of that, these incinerate effects doesn't reduce her block proficiency or remove her perfect block chance. Now, in addition to this, she is also immune to special lock, power lock, cold snap, and frostbite effects. And since all her attacks deal energy damage, she completely bypasses champions like Korg or Atuma, who reflect back physical damage. And finally, she starts every fight with an indefinite instinct buff, which allows her to parry non-contact hits. Now this gives her a huge advantage against tricky champions like Shuri and Arnim Zola. Now let's talk about one of her most unique mechanics, the iridescent sun. If you pay attention during the fight, you'll notice a ray of sunlight appearing at random spots across the battlefield. It stays there for a short time, then it fades and reappears somewhere else. And if you look closely, there's even a timer showing when it's about to vanish. So why is this important? Well, Karolina gains several abilities while she's standing under the sun. So basically you want to stay in the light as much as possible. Here's how it works. So for every 0.65 seconds she spends in the sun, she gains 1 iridescence buff. One thing to note is that she always starts the fight with 2 iridescence buffs, and she can stack them up to a maximum of 15. If she's under the sun, she also gains a power gain buff, giving her 2% of a bar of power per second for each iridescence buff, up to 6. That means if she's stacked up, her power bar fills super fast. Also, if she's under the sun and charges a heavy attack right after a non-combo ending attack, she inflicts a stun passive for 2.2 seconds, and duration of this stun can't be modified by tech champions. Now, if she launches a special attack while under the sun, she gains an unblockable buff for the entire duration of that special. This means that you can throw your special attacks without worrying about them getting blocked. And finally, while attacking, she's able to stand still under the sun when you are not holding block. This is going to help you stay longer in the sun. Now, let's look into one of Karolina's most powerful abilities. And honestly, this could potentially make her a top tier champion. I'm talking about her ability to minimize incoming damage just by holding block. Here's how it works. Whenever Karolina blocks a hit, she consumes some of her iridescence buffs depending on the type of attack. In exchange, she gains a glancing buff for the attack. Now, this buff is removed if she actually gets hit, but as long as she's blocking, she's good. So when an opponent's attack is glanced, Karolina takes 85% reduced damage, and on top of that, the offensive ability accuracy of the defender is reduced by 40%. Now, the number of iridescence buffs consumed depends on the type of attack. Light and medium attacks only consume 1 iridescence buff, while special ones take 3 buffs, and special 2s consume 6 buffs. Now, one thing to note here is that iridescence buffs aren't consumed per hit of a special attack. Instead, they're only consumed once at the start of the special. So for example, if your opponent launches a special one, Karolina will consume 3 iridescence buffs on the very first hit to trigger her glancing buff. But that glancing effect stays active for the entire duration of the special, no matter how many hits it has. This means you don't have to stress about your buffs draining super fast. As long as you manage them properly, Karolina can block specials without burning all of her buffs. Finally, every time she spends iridescence buffs while blocking, she also applies an energy vulnerability passive on her opponent, 1 for each buff consumed. These last for 15 seconds and can stack up to maximum of 6. So not only is she taking less damage, she's setting up the opponent to take more energy damage in return. Now let's take a quick moment to understand just how powerful this mechanic really is. For that, let's look at a defender we all hate fighting, Yelena Belova. If you've ever gone up against her, you know exactly how punishing her specials can be, even if you try blocking them. But let's see what happens when you bring Karolina. Did you see how Karolina took only minimal damage against a rank 4 Yelena? That's how powerful the glancing ability is. And just for context, let's compare her to a champion who has one of the highest block proficiencies in the game, Shuri. Did you see the difference? Even Shuri doesn't come close to the level of damage reduction Karolina gets from glancing. So, if there is a champions who you find hard to dex, you can bring in Karolina. But there is a catch. You cannot use her against champions who have unblockable special because she doesn't have any ability to counter that. Now let's move on to her primary source of damage, her incinerate passives. Each of her personal incinerate passives deals energy damage over 14 seconds. These will be paused during the special attacks. Also, you can stack these up to a maximum of 12. As a defender, personal incinerate scales with base attack and only deals half the damage. And during Karolina's special attacks, personal incinerates deal no damage. Instead, each of Karolina's special attack hits inflicts an instant incinerate for each personal incinerate active, dealing a burst of energy damage per bar of power spent. Now let's break down her special attacks one by one. When using her special one, she gains 8 iridescence buffs over the course of the special attack. Now this can be very useful for quickly regaining iridescence buffs to block devastating special attacks when we don't have the sufficient amount. When using her special 2, each hit consumes 1 iridescence buff to inflict 1 personal incinerate passive. So this will be the primary way for Karolina to inflict incinerate's passives. And finally, when using special 3, she consumes up to 12 iridescence buffs to inflict 12 incinerate passives. Also, she gains a non-stacking 10% intensify buff for 24 seconds. And while this is active, she generates iridescence buffs 35% faster while she's under the sun. Now let's take a look at Karolina's signature ability, which adds some really strong utility to her kit once she's awakened. So, whenever Karolina has her block struck by a heavy attack, she can resist a block break by consuming 6 of her iridescence buffs, and she gains a glancing buff for the duration of the attack. And when she is at or above 6 iridescence buffs, her personal incinerates can pulverize 1 armor up effect, removing and dealing a burst of direct damage. Finally, for each iridescence buff up to 6, her incinerate potency is increased by 5%. Now, this SIG ability really gives her a strong utility, and it opens the door to a fewer new matchups like Red Skull or Sentinel. But this brings us to the question whether you need it or not. Well, I think this SIG ability really adds a great value to her kit, so if possible, I would awaken her. Now, let's talk about how to actually use Karolina in a fight. So first, focus on building at least 6 iridescence buffs by staying under the sun. Now, if you're having trouble keeping her in the sunlight, you can try delaying your light and medium attacks, or try to keep your combos short like medium, or medium, light. And don't forget, you can also use her passive stun by charging a heavy right after a non-combo ending attack when you're under the sun to stay longer. Now, once you build up at least 6 iridescence buffs, make sure you don't take too many hits into your block, since each light, medium, or special attack can remove your iridescence buffs by a given amount. So, it's better to build at least 8 to 10 buffs to make sure you always have at least 6 of them active. Once you have enough iridescence buffs, build to your special 2. Now, if you stay under the sun, you'll gain a power gain buff, which grants you 2% of a bar of power for each iridescence buffs up to 6, which means if you have 6 iridescence buffs, you'll gain 12% bar of power each second, which will help you to gain your SP2 really fast. Finally, once your SP2 is active, use it to convert your iridescence buffs into incinerate passives. Now, remember that you'll be converting 1 iridescence buffs into 1 incinerate passives for each hit of your SP2. Now, her SP2 has a total of 6 hits, which means she'll be converting 6 iridescence buffs into 6 incinerate passives. So this is why you need to maintain at least 6 iridescence buff before throwing your SP2. So this is what you have to do to bring your opponent down. Now, as you can already tell, her SP2 is her main source of damage, and depending on the fight, you might have to chain your SP2 to bring your opponent down. Now let's see this in action. Oh, by the way, if you are wondering which stat focus to use, I would recommend you to use the block proficiency 1 for the attack, because it can give an extra boost to her already insane blocking. Now, if you want to go one step further, you can use the new StatCast relics with block proficiency as the secondary ability. So the question is, does she deserve a spot in top of the list? Well, she clearly checks all the boxes for a god tier champion. Does she has crazy damage? Check. Good utility? Check. Can she counter meta defenders? Check. Easy to use? Check. So yes, I think she deserves a spot in the top of the list. So what you guys think? Is she one of the top 5 Cosmic? Tell me in the comments.